are you? And where are you going? What do you want?
Hello and welcome to Jiggers' Place. I'm your host, Kevin Bemel, and we're here every other Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific time to talk about all the aspects of life that aren't related to business and finances. So Jiggers' Place is named after my dog, Jiggers. Here's this picture right here. He's a Jack Russell Terrier, and he was the most convivial being certainly that I've ever met. And if you want to know more about him and the roots of Jiggers' Place, so please go to the original episode of this show, which is now in its second season, and you can learn about it there. Or you can come to Los Angeles and visit Jiggers' Place, and in my my bar guide, you have the story right there. So today, I've been promoting this show all week and trying to figure out exactly how I wanted to say this, and I came up with this getting ready for the show. Today we're going to talk about the finer things in life. So that is a phrase that you don't hear very much anymore, but it was very common when I was a boy to talk about the finer things in life. And as I remarked yesterday, it's not the things that make life worth living, because I think the things that make life worth living are family, friends, doing good things in the world. But they're the things that enhance our lives. They give us some pleasure. They're things that we can feel some passion about and share with other people. That's that sort of thing. And while I was aware of such things when I was growing up, I didn't really get into them until I read a book by one of my favorite authors, Peter Mayle. The book is called Acquired Tastes. And I'm going to be talking specifically about Peter Mayle's work and that book as it focuses on the finer things in life and kind of in talking about that. So normally I make a cocktail for here in Jiggers' Place, because as you can see, I've got my whole bar behind me here. But in honor of Peter Mayle, who unfortunately passed away now, I think it's about 2-3 years ago, I'm going to highlight one of his acquired tastes, and that is whiskey in particular. Now, in England, which is where Peter Mayle was from, when you say whiskey, what you mean almost for sure is what we here in America call Scotch. So I was my father was a Scotch drinker, and I have two of his favorites in my bar. I was not a whiskey aficionado at all. Never could understand why my dad liked it. But then reading about it in Acquired Taste, I got a sense of what my father must enjoy about it. And by the way, this book came out long before the explosion of craft distilleries and all this kind of stuff, and the sort of resurgence of spirits as one of the finer things, one of the pleasures in life. So for those of you not particularly familiar with whiskey, and I'm going to be using that term meaning Scotch whiskey, as opposed to say bourbon, rye, Canadian, those kind of things. Basically, there's two categories of whiskeys. There's blended whiskeys and there's single malt whiskeys. Now the fact of the matter is most single malt whiskeys are sort of blended, because the only way you could have a whiskey that's not blended is to have it be a single cask whiskey. But when we say a single malt whiskey, we really mean a whiskey where all of what's in the bottle is developed to be of the precise flavor profile, as opposed to a blended whiskey where several whiskeys of different flavor profiles are blended together. And blended whiskeys are really meant to be consistent year after year after year. Less so with single malt whiskeys, although over the last, I don't know, I've been drinking single malts now for 25 years, I think. I haven't noticed the flavor profiles of my preferences change, but be that as it may. So my dad's all-time favorite whiskey was a blended whiskey. I don't have it in the bottle here. It's in a decanter with a Jack Russell Terrier on it for Jiggers Place, and it's Johnny Walker Black. Now, in the days when my father drank Johnny Walker, there were two. There was Johnny Walker Red, which was pretty awful, and Johnny Walker Black, which was quite good. So my rack whiskey is Johnny Walker Black, in honor of my father. Nowadays, you have Johnny Walker Green and Gold and Blue. I will say I've had Blue several times. It's fine. It's a decent blended whiskey, but I think it's not a particularly good value. I think there's a lot of whiskeys that are much better, that are much less expensive. But anyway, and I always have a Johnny Walker Black and soda on Friday afternoon in preparation for the Jewish Sabbath in honor of my father. And it is to this day one of my very favorite Scotch whiskeys. Another one of my father's favorites that I have in my bar is Cutty Sark. I think that's because he was a sailor. I don't know. I never asked him. I wish I had. My other very favorite blended Scotch whiskey is the famous Grouse. And you can't tell on the bottle, but right here is an emblem. And it is by appointment of Her Majesty the Queen, Scotch Whiskey Blenders, Matthew Blowock and Son Limited. So the Queen to whom they're referring is Queen Elizabeth II, who, if you follow such things, passed away, I think, about 1.5 years or 2 years ago. So this was Queen Elizabeth II's favorite whiskey. And again, it's a wonderful blended Scotch whiskey. And I also on Friday afternoons, I have a little tipple of the famous Grouse, and I toast to the Queen, because I think Queen Elizabeth II, one of the greatest women who ever lived. My all-time favorite Scotch whiskey is a single malt Scotch whiskey, Oban. Okay, this is a 14-year-old single malt Scotch whiskey. It is a West Highland whiskey. That West Highland is just the part of Scotland from which it comes. And I've told the story about it, I think, on a previous show, but I was in Seattle on business. I flew in late on a Sunday afternoon, didn't have to work until Monday, decided to go out to dinner to this very cozy restaurant a few blocks from my hotel. It was a darkening night as I walked down there. Seattle is a very misty town. It was very romantic. I walked into this restaurant. It was very warm inside. And they had a whiskey flight of single malt Scotch whiskeys. Prior to that, I really hadn't tasted single malts that I recall. And there was a 10, a 12, a 14, and a 16-year-old Scotch whiskey. And so I was sitting in this big leather chair at a, it wasn't the bar, because there was a bar, but it was a place where people who were eating by themselves could sit. You could see the kitchen, across the way. And I ordered this flight of single malt Scotch whiskeys, and I drank the 10, and I thought, it's okay. I couldn't tell you what it was. I drank the 12, it's okay. I drank the 14, and angels started to sing. And I drank the 16, and it wasn't nearly as good as the 14. So, the number of years that a Scotch has been aged doesn't necessarily mean, if a Scotch is older, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's better, at least in my experience. So in honor of Peter Mayle, I'm going to have a single malt Scotch whiskey. And I thought I would take just another minute to talk about glasses. So, typically Scotch will be drunk in a what's called a rocks glass. It's a sort of a squat, somewhat squarish glass. It goes by a number of names, and some people like to drink their whiskey over an ice cube. Some people like to have a little water in it. Some people drink it with soda. That's generally how I drink it, although not a single malt as good as Oban. And then these Cairn glasses became very popular for drinking whiskey. You can see they have this sort of shape, and the idea is they funnel the nose of the whiskey so that you're not really supposed to stick your nose into a glass, whether it's wine or whiskey or whatever, but this funnels the scent of the whiskey for you to drink it. And this one happens to be from Tarnished Truth Distilling Company, which is the distillery in the basement of the Cavalier Hotel in Virginia Beach. My sister was just there over the past weekend. I had recommended it that she visit there, and she just loved it. My go-to whiskey glass is actually a Shirley Temple mug, or a Shirley Temple little glass here. I got this from my dear Marie, the woman that I always sign off my show with. She's my belle, and so ironically, I guess, Marie was not into spirits. I don't even think she drank wine. I hope that she doesn't mind my using the glass that I inherited from her to drink whiskey in. And Shirley Temple, always one of my favorite actresses, a great woman. You may know she was an ambassador when President Reagan was in office, and just a tremendous human being. And so this glass brings together so much of what I enjoy and respect in life. So I'm just going to pour myself some Oban, and then we're going to continue with the show. So, well, maybe more than I should, but oh well, whatever. And I will wish you cheers. So good. So good. Okay, I'll see you on the couch.
So here we are. It's Thursday afternoon here in Los Angeles. I was fortunate enough to have a house guest till this morning. One of my dearest friends, David. He and his wife live in Florida. He was here on business, and it's always a pleasure to spend time with David and to be able to host him. And we had dinner a couple nights ago and had some wine together. After a very difficult week last week, it was really wonderful to have a friend. And by the way, you may be wondering, wait, don't you wear a bow tie for Jiggers' place? Yes, normally I do. And don't you wear a four-in hand tie for all your other shows? Yes. So what's with the sort of handkerchief tied around your neck? So we're going to get to that. So as I mentioned, this show is about the finer things in life, and it's also kind of a tribute to one of my favorite writers, Peter Mayle. So Peter Mayle was an advertising executive in England. As far as I know, he spent his advertising career in London, although I think he did spend some time here in the United States as well. And I don't know exactly why. But at one point he decided he tells the story in the book, but he and his wife decided that he was going to give up advertising and they were going to move to the south of France, in particular to Provence. And they did, and he wrote a book sort of memorializing their experience called A Year in Provence. This is the book. This is the paperback version of it anyway. And it was written, 1982. Let's see how good my memory is. 1989. And the book was an enormous success. It really kind of took the world by storm, and it is a wonderful book. It's funny, it's charming, it's informative, and it really shows the love of a man for his wife, for the country of his birth, for the country of his adoption. This whole thing about how the English and the French hate each other. No, I don't think, not so much. Certainly not the case with Peter Mayle. And like, I don't want to call him Peter. I never met him. But like Peter Mayle, I am both an Anglophile and a Francophile. So there are many parts of both countries' cultures that I dearly love. This is a little sketch of him, by the way, with his dog. The illustrations are done by Judith. Shoot, what's her name? Judith Clancy. So it's an absolutely wonderful book, charming book. Highly recommend it. You can read it, in one sitting. And this is what introduced me to Peter Mayle and to the south of France. So before that, for me, France was always Paris. I can't tell you how many times I've watched An American in Paris, but to me, the Gene Kelly movie is the epitome of what France is about. And I idolized, or not idolized, but romanticized Paris and France for decades until I finally visited there for the first time in January of 2018. And as I remarked to the people I was with there at the time, the City of Lights does not disappoint, even with all of the romanticism that I had built up over the decades. I was still absolutely enchanted by Paris. So then a few years after that, and let me get you the date here. In actually a year later, or no, 3 years later, in 1992, Peter Mayle wrote a book called Acquired Tastes. And this is a book about all of, from Peter Mayle's perspective, all of the finer things in life. It was actually the fourth book that he wrote. And he talks about, he gives funny names to the chapters. I'm going to read some of them. So one of them is which side do you dress? That's a reference to having tailor-made clothes, because that's what the tailor will ask you. The Millionaire's Mushroom, which is about truffles. How the rich keep warm. That's about cashmere. A Mouthful of Black Pearls. That's about caviar. The True Cigar, which is, of course, about cigars. And one of the chapters is about the malt, meaning Scotch whiskey. Cheers. So, I read about all these wonderful things that that Peter Mayle talked about, and I said, some of these sound quite intriguing. So one of them was the which side do you dress and the shirt deluxe. So it used to be that all clothing was essentially tailor-made in the sense that you didn't go to the store and buy clothes off the rack. If you were wealthy, you had a tailor make them for you. And if you were poor, your mother made them for you, or your wife made them for you, or you sewed them yourself. But we didn't shop for clothes the way we do now. And so so-called bespoke clothing is has become especially at the time of this book, had really become the province of the very wealthy. But I was intrigued by the idea of having a suit made specifically for me. And you probably can't tell, but this shoulder is actually lower than this shoulder because I broke my collarbone. And so no matter what I would get, whenever I would buy a suit off the rack, it never fit quite right because I'm lopsided, basically. So I was involved with a networking group. I got involved with a networking group, I should say, around the same time that this book came out. And a tailor joined the group, and he had what he called the clothing plan, where you could pay so many dollars a month, and depending on how much you paid, periodically you could come in and order a suit or a sports coat and slacks or some shirts, whatever. And they would all be, they weren't really bespoke. That's a little bit different. They were what were called made to measure, which is kind of a middle ground between off the rack, what you buy in a store, and bespoke, which is very carefully made exactly for your body. The fellow's name was Greg Chapman. His shop still exists on Robertson Boulevard in Beverly Hills, just several blocks north of where I live right now. And the first suit I had him make for me was a very subtly pinstriped blue suit. I love that suit. I don't have it any longer. But over the years, he made a number of suits for me. They fit like a dream. They were so comfortable to wear that I started wearing suits every day just because they were the most comfortable things that I had to wear. He did make me a tuxedo at one point. I actually still have that tuxedo. It's frankly a little bit out of style, but the jacket is just, it's so comfortable because it's made very much for the shape of my body. And one of the things that Greg dealt with is the fact that I have one shoulder lower than the other, and so that was adjusted for in the suits to begin with, rather than what I had to do with a suit that I bought off the rack, where they had to kind of try and remake the suit a little, or remake the coat a little bit to accommodate my weirdly shaped shoulders. So I tried that, and then I had him make shirts for me. And again, these shirts fit so well. One of the things I realized was I wore them so often and had to have them laundered so often that they, pretty quickly wore out. And that is one of the things about shirts is, you kind of need to have a lot of them so that you're not wearing them and laundering them, constantly. And you need to have a launderer like Brown's Cleaners in Santa Monica, where they launder your shirts in cold water, which maintains their condition and wearability much longer than if they're laundered in warm or hot water, which has a negative impact on the fabric. It can cause them to shrink. And in fact, the cleaners I went to before Brown's Cleaners, They laundered my shirts in hot water, and in several cases with some beautiful tuxedo shirts, they ended up with sleeves that were too short. Unfortunately, I couldn't wear the shirts, didn't fit me anymore. So, when I was talking with my nephew on Tuesday, and somehow we got on the subject of men's clothing, and he was telling me that he really, he would really like to learn how to dress better. There was no one to. Well, his mother tried to. He said my mom tried to show him. My sister, his mother tried to show him how when he was kind of a teenager. He wasn't interested, and now that he's, a little bit older, he's married, going to be having a baby soon. He really feels like he needs to sort of upgrade his clothing, and so we talked about it a little bit, and God willing, he'll ask me for more guidance, and hopefully I'll introduce him to the comfort that comes from clothes that fit you well, even though suits and slacks and sports coats and collared shirts have the reputation for being uncomfortable. In many cases, they can be at least as comfortable as sweats, if not more so. And the way they make a person feel is certainly worth any minor margin of discomfort that there may be, that there may come from not wearing sweats. So that was one of the finer things in life that I learned from Peter Mayle. My older sister started out professionally as a fashion designer of women's clothing, and so I learned from her that it was important to dress beautifully, but I didn't learn anything about tailored or bespoke or made-to-measure clothing from her, and that's okay. She gave me an awareness of how a man should dress, and then Peter Mayle took it from there. So that's one of the finer things in life that I got from Peter Mayle. Another is Scotch whiskey, which I've already told you about. Another is what he calls the millionaire's mushroom, which is truffles. So if you've never had truffles, they are kind of like a mushroom in texture. They have a more earthy flavor. They also have a smell to them that's quite savory. And they're just a wonderful thing to eat. So people will grate them over an omelet. People will mix them into pate. I know I have, I think, two little jars of truffle oil, where I think it's olive oil that's been infused with truffles. They're like mushrooms on steroids, but in a good way. And the whole way that truffles grow, the way they're found. So in France, dogs and pigs are trained to sniff out truffles, and there's black truffles, there's white truffles. So it's a whole thing, and they're only in season in the fall. You can get them canned, of course. The canned are not as good as fresh truffles. And fresh truffles, of course, very expensive. I couldn't tell you what their cost is nowadays. I can't afford them. Even the canned ones are expensive. But if you have the opportunity to taste them, avail yourself of the opportunity, especially if you love mushrooms, because they are a taste sensation. And I never would have known about them or tried them had it not been for Peter Mayle. And so staying on the culinary side of things, I mentioned another one of his chapters, A Mouthful of Black Pearls. So as I said at the beginning of the show, this refers to caviar. So caviar has come to mean any kind of fish eggs, but in its kind of original usage, it referred specifically to the eggs of certain species of sturgeon in Russia. So there's beluga, which is one species of sturgeon that caviar historically came from. And there's let's see, beluga, and shoot, I had another one in my mind. Now it went away. Sevruga is another one. So there were different ones. Now, there is a controversy in the kosher world because historically the sturgeon was not considered a kosher fish. And so therefore the eggs from that fish would not be kosher. And the reason it was considered not kosher is supposedly sturgeon didn't have scales. So about 20 or 25 years ago, because we now have things like microscopes, somebody examined a sturgeon and said, indeed, it does have scales. So the sturgeon should be kosher. The tradition is they're not, and so you can't eat genuine caviar. So, depending on how strict you are, I'll let you figure that out for yourself or in consultation with your rabbi. But these days, you have things like salmon caviar, which is basically salmon, what would have been called previously salmon roe, salmon eggs. And the salmon is a kosher fish, so even if you keep kosher, you can eat it, and it's quite delicious. I will, on occasion, when I can afford it, have salmon roe, and I tend to have it just like one does caviar, with a little creme fraiche or some sour cream, with some chopped hard-boiled eggs, some chopped red onion, on maybe a toast, like a wafer toast, or a particularly good thing to have caviar on is something called shmura matzah. It's a type of matzah, or I should say specifically handmade shmura matzah. It's a particular type of matzah that's only available during the Passover season, and I'll usually get an extra box to have on hand. It's a very dry, almost cracker-like bread, because it's just flour and water, but it's particularly good to have with salmon roe or caviar. And in fact, I'm told that there are high-end restaurants in New York, for example, that during the Passover season will stock up on shmura matzah and serve it with caviar, until basically you run out of it. And the idea is it has a fairly neutral taste, and so it's the perfect base for the caviar, or the caviar with the eggs and the creme fraiche and the chopped onions. So I had heard of caviar, of course, but I had never thought about trying it until I read Acquired Tastes. And Peter Mayle is right. It is wonderful. Now, if you detest fish, you're probably not going to like caviar, but it is really an amazing taste. So there are you can also get kosher whitefish caviar, which is, the eggs themselves are black. They look very much like actual caviar, although they're really whitefish roe. And it doesn't, to my palate, taste like caviar. First of all, it's saltier than caviar, but it also is very delicious. Not nearly as expensive as caviar for sure, or even as salmon roe. And so, if you're looking for a way to kind of ease yourself into the caviar world or the egg, the fish egg world, consider whitefish roe. Now, a little tip on caviar, I think I learned it from Peter Mayle, is don't eat it with a metal spoon, because the interaction between the caviar and the metal causes an oxidation that brings a bad flavor to the caviar. So historically, caviar spoons were made of horn, like the horn of a cow. And in fact, my mother, when she found out I had developed an affinity for caviar, gave me two sets of caviar spoons, and they're made from horn. They're quite beautiful, and they're absolutely the right thing. They're absolutely the best utensil for eating caviar if you're just going to kind of scoop it and eat it, or even if you're going to scoop it and put it on a cracker or matzah or toast, whatever you can do. You don't want the oxidation from the metal. So if you've ever had caviar from a metal spoon and didn't like it, I do recommend that you try it again without using a metal spoon. You may find that you like it, because I have had it dished from a metal spoon, and it definitely tasted funny, if not actually bad. And so the other, what's become kind of a classic caviar spoon is the plastic spoons you get from Baskin Robbins, of all things. So plastic too does not interact with the caviar, and so it's a free. If you've gone to Baskin Robbins, they'll give you a spoon to eat your ice cream, or a little spoon that they use for the tasting spoon. I have sets of both of them, and they are also kind of a fun way to eat caviar. And so, plastic spoon or traditional caviar spoon made of bone, either one. If you're going to try caviar, use one of those spoons. I like it plain. I like it, just to take a spoonful of it. I like it on just, matzah by itself or toast by itself. But it's so good when you have the creme fraiche or the sour cream and the caviar, a little bit of chopped hard-boiled egg, and a little bit of chopped up red onion. Those flavors together, there's something about them, all the flavors coming together. There's nothing like them, and there are a few things, to the extent that we can measure the quality of taste, that compare to them. So another thing that I got from Peter Mayle. And let's see, what other finer things in life do I want to tell you about before I let you go? So it was also through the offices of Peter Mayle that I decided to try cigars. So my father smoked a pipe when I was a boy, and the smell of pipe tobacco, I can still kind of smell it in my mind's nose, so to speak. He smoked cherry tobacco. It was a particular brand of pipe tobacco that was very popular in the 60s and 70s. And my favorite picture of my dad is one kind of a semi-profile of him. He has his pipe. But I never tried smoking a pipe, was never into smoking cigarettes, and was always kind of intrigued by cigars, but the kind of cigars that were around when I was a kid, the sort of the ones you'd buy in a drugstore or whatever, not very high quality. They smelled bad when they were burning, and so never really interested me. And then but reading about them in Acquired Tastes, I thought, well, maybe if I had a chance to try a high quality cigar, I would. But I never had the chance until this was it was not long after I read this book. It was early to mid 1990s. Some friends of mine invited me up to their house. They were living in, I think it was Redwood City, south of San Francisco. And they invited me up and, for dinner. So I drove up for dinner. We had dinner and they said, would you like to hang out in the hot tub? And I love hot tubs. And I had brought my swimsuit. And I'm getting, I'm in the room changing into my swimsuit, and this is my life. My ex-girlfriend, through whom I had met them, shows up at their house. And I thought, this is a little bit weird, but whatever. I hadn't seen her in years. And so we get into the hot tub, and my host, Dennis, says, would you like some port wine? So I'm telling you, any kind of wine is okay with me. So Dennis went and got some port wine. Was it port wine? No, I take that back. It was cognac. I'm sorry. He asked if you wanted some cognac. So he went and got some cognac, a French brandy, basically, from the Cognac region in France. And if you're familiar with it, so cognac is served in a kind of bulbous glass, and typically you'll kind of warm it up a little bit. So of course the heat coming off of the hot tub was warming the cognac. And so we're sitting in this, it was a gigantic hot tub. I've never seen a hot tub bigger than this one. We're sitting in this gigantic hot tub, very relaxed with our cognac. And then Dennis says, my cousin sent me some Cuban cigars. And I'm thinking to myself, you can't get Cuban cigars in the United States. At the time, it was illegal. It may still be. And I said, well, how did you get those? He said, well, my cousin in England, they're able to get them. And so then he sent them to me in the United States. So he said, if you'd like one. So I figured this is my big chance. So he went and got his cigars. Now, if you can kind of picture this in a hot tub, the warm, bubbly water, the cognac, the steam, and the cigar. So the steam coming off the cognac, it's coming off of the hot tub, really mellowed this cigar. And it was just wonderful. To be honest, it was one of the few times I really enjoyed a full-on, big stogie type cigar. Most of the times after that, they're just too big and too much for me to take. And so I don't think you can see it behind me because it's blocked by these books. I do have a humidor. And in my humidor, I have what are called club-size cigars, which are cigars that are a little bit bigger than a traditional cigarette. And I was introduced to them by a chaplain friend of mine when I was stationed in Germany, where you can get Cuban cigars. I have Davidas. That was the one I enjoyed the most. And they're really wonderful. So if you're not a smoker, but you want to enjoy or you want to see if a cigar is enjoyable for you, what I would recommend is get a club size cigar. They're not going to overwhelm you, and you can get a sense of, now, why are cigars so wonderful? Well, first of all, you don't inhale them into your lungs like you do cigarettes. You take the smoke into your mouth and then you expel it. So what you're doing is you're tasting the flavor of the tobacco without ingesting the smoke. So now there are some cigar smokers who tell you there's no danger in smoking cigars. I don't know that that's actually the case. There are, cases where people get, like mouth cancer from cigars. But if like me, you have a club-sized cigar, maybe once a month, very unlikely you're going to have any, health problems from them. And what you're really going to experience is the deliciousness of tobacco. And unlike, like the 50s, 60s, 70s, where people, chain smoked and they'd smoke, a pack of cigarettes a day and that kind of thing, that was not historically how tobacco was meant to be enjoyed. So tobacco was kind of like almost a dessert, if you will. And so from that standpoint, the health impact is small, if at all. And again, it was because of acquired taste that I tried them. So and I have friends who, they dearly love cigars and they all kinds of things about them. I just treat them as a little bit of a treat once in a while. So that's another acquired taste to which Peter Mayle introduced me. And then the last one, well, actually, no, I'm sorry. There's two more I want to talk about. So one is champagne. So if you read any of Peter Mayle's books, champagne is a part of his books. I never had tried champagne, I think, before I read his books. Having read them, I was curious, and one sip and I was sold. There is no greater beverage in the world than champagne. And when I say champagne, I mean specifically sparkling wine that is from the Champagne region of France. That is the only wine that qualifies to be called champagne. That's by law in France and by treaty with any country to which champagne is shipped, like the United States. And indeed, champagne is made according to what's known as méthode champenoise, which is the champagne method. And indeed, countries who have signed this treaty, they're not supposed to allow sparkling wine made in the champagne method to be called méthode champenoise. They're supposed to call it méthode traditionnelle, which is the traditional method. It's the same method as champagne, but it's not actually performed in the Champagne region of France. So there is nothing better to this day than champagne in sparkling wine. There just isn't. It could be the conditions under which it's aged in these sort of chalk structured cave, which is the cellars in which it's aged. It could be the chalk in the soil in which the grapes are grown. There's lots of different theories about it, but the carbonation is so fine yet distinctive. The taste, the bouquet, all of it. There's no better beverage, in my opinion, than champagne. Now, there are lovely sparkling wines from other countries. There are wonderful cavas from Spain. There are wonderful proseccos from Italy. There are sparkling wines here in the United States that are made. One of my favorite is it's not even méthode traditionnelle. My friend Jeff Morgan makes a sparkling wine that really is very simply made. It's essentially a Chardonnay wine with CO2 pumped into it. But I love the Covenant sparkling wine that he makes. He sells out every year very quickly. The Herzog Winery. These are all kosher, of course, because I keep kosher. The Herzog Winery makes a méthode traditionnelle white sparkling wine and rosé sparkling wine. They do label it as méthode champenoise. I think that's wrong on their part, but it is very good. So there are good sparkling wines made outside of champagne, but in the end, there is nothing like champagne, to borrow a line from the great show South Pacific. So If you like wine, but you've never had sparkling wine, try some champagne. And especially it's not just for special occasions. People associate champagne with celebration. I think it's the opposite way around. I think drinking champagne makes the time that you're drinking it a wonderful occasion. So I encourage you to think of it that way. So that's the penultimate acquired taste. And then the final acquired taste that Peter Mayle talks about is a great hotel. So look, I love being at home. But when I travel, if I have to travel, I vastly prefer to stay in a great hotel. Now, a great hotel doesn't mean that it's big or that it's well known or that it has all kinds of amenities. No, it's a hotel where the guest is welcomed warmly and sincerely. It's a place where the rooms are clean, and whether they're richly appointed or somewhat more sparingly appointed, they're designed for comfort, and it's a place that you just enjoy coming to, and even though you're going home, you leave with a sense of bittersweetness. So there is the Mayflower Hotel in Seattle. That's an example of one of the great hotels that I've stayed in. Oh gosh, I'm going up on the name. There's a hotel in the Mountain Brook area of Birmingham. It's part of the Kessler collection, and I'm going up on the name. And it's a newer hotel, whereas the Mayflower is an historic hotel. It is wonderful. The staff there is superb. The bar is just a wonderful place to go have a cocktail and relax. I always enjoyed when I had to travel to Birmingham a lot to take care of my dear Marie. I always enjoyed staying there, and it was always a little bit bittersweet leaving, even though I was going home. So there is nothing like a wonderful hotel. And Peter Mayle wrote a book. I'll give you the date. Yeah, it was actually written the year after Acquired Taste in 1993, called Hotel Pastis. And this is his first fiction book that he wrote, sorry. And it's the story of an advertising executive who essentially gives up the fast-paced, stress-filled world of advertising in London to buy and refurbish a building into a boutique hotel in Provence. I think I've read this book every year since I've gotten it, so I've probably read it more than 20 times. I know I gave it as a gift to a client of mine when I had my real estate company, and he devoured it. He was a big fan of Provence. He and his wife used to go there every year in the summer, and he sent me a message about the fantasy of it. But the Hotel Provence is essentially an ode to a great hotel. And if you like to travel like I do, and I aspire to be a member of the Traveler's Century Club, which is a club where you've traveled to 100 countries in the world. I'm not anywhere near that now. My effort has been stalled for personal reasons the last few years. But there are places that we can go to where they're not home, but we're still greeted like family. And that's really I think the theme of Hotel Pastis. It's a wonderful book. It's the kind of book you can see it's kind of starting to get dog-eared from the number of times I've read it. But if you want some romance in your life, read Hotel Pastis, and then make plans to travel and find a Hotel Pastis in real life, knowing that, the odds are against finding it, but there's as much pleasure in the hunt as there is in the finding. And I think I'm saying this as much to remind myself as I am to share with you. I think much of the delight in life is not necessarily in the finding. It's in the search. And if we can keep that in mind, it will reduce the impact of the difficult aspects of our lives, and it will give us something to look forward to and to enjoy and to revel in the search, and then truly delight when we find it. I found a handful of hotels like this in the world. One of them that leaps to mind is the hotel at Colonial Williamsburg. They have little cottages with fireplaces. One of the most delightful 3 days I've ever had in my entire life. And life isn't living in Hotel Pastis, but the thought that for short periods of time we can find them will hopefully give us the strength to get through the challenges of life. And now that I think about it, hopefully Jiggers' place is like one of these hotels. It's a place where you can come to relax and just enjoy, forget about the cares of the workaday world, and we can just spend a little while together. So, a final toast to you, my live viewers especially. I wish you a wonderful evening. Excuse me. A wonderful rest of the week and weekend. The Way to Wow shows start again on Monday at 10 a.m. and we can continue to learn together, and 2 weeks from today continue to enjoy life together. So, signing off. I thank you very much for joining me. And if you're not watching, if you're watching this, on my YouTube channel, subsequently, I thank you very, very much for viewing this episode. And signing off as I always do. Marie, darling, you are my belle. I hope up in Shemaim in heaven that you're looking down on the things that I do, and you're pleased by my attempt to bring your legacy to the world, and know that I love you, and I to this day am very privileged that I got to spend all the time I did with you the last year of your life. Courage at all times, my friends.